Welcome back to Friend Crush Season 6. Here we go. Okay, so thank you for your patience waiting on the new season. It took me a while to really figure out what type of content I want to make. I went through a phase where I was like, you know what, we're just going to do video content. But then I realized, there's still value in audio format. Some topics and the way that I talk about certain things, I think makes way more sense in just audio. Literally no one wants to see me ramble. And then other topics, I feel like now that I have been on TikTok for a while and I'm getting into trying to visualize certain concepts, that makes sense in maybe a 10-15 minute YouTube video. Other topics make more sense as a 15 to 30 minute audio. Some guest episodes I think will be audio, and others, if the guest is comfortable with being on camera, we can do a guest video episode. Because I did have someone tell me that it's fun to get facial reactions and stuff and body language when you do a guest interview. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone's doing well. At the time of recording, it's just after Chinese New Year. So happy Year of the Dragon. Wishing everyone peace, love, and prosperity in 2024. I didn't really get to properly celebrate Chinese New Year, in a traditional sense, with my family because I was in Tokyo DJing. I was only meant to DJ 2 nights, and then I got asked to play a third night. And it was chaotic and fun. It was interesting because I was honestly kind of dreading it before I went, because even though I love Tokyo and I love DJing, it's not kind of my usual style of gig. And I have this weird complex about playing mainstream kind of music, even though I feel I'm inherently more of an underground music DJ, or I'm more in that scene. A lot of people have weird reservations about crossover between these two sides of the music industry or genre, but I'm just trying to embrace the fact that I am good at playing commercial gigs. Even though I love underground music, I was trained as a DJ in Australia when I was playing uni parties and literally played every type of event you can imagine. I feel 21st, 18th. I may or may not have DJ'd weddings. I honestly can't remember, after parties and stuff. Law school, university parties. Yeah, I've played everything. And I feel especially in Shanghai, a lot of the DJs that I know, they started DJing in the club and very specific to their own music taste. But I have just had a different experience, and I think that I have a very specific skill set as a result of it, and I don't need to be ashamed of that or shy away from it, even if it's not considered conventionally #cool or not. I had a really fun time in Tokyo. Flights, hotel, paid for flights and hotel to Tokyo are expensive from Shanghai, and I also got paid to work, and I got to hang out with my friends and eat great food. I literally have nothing to complain about. So I had a fun, chaotic Chinese New Year. I've taken the last week to have an existential crisis about what I want to do with my life. No clear conclusions yet. Stay tuned. But at least I made progress in terms of figuring out how I want to approach this next season and making more kind of content. Also, yeah, I feel a little bit better, well rested than usual, just because I wasn't in the club last weekend. So I did 3 nights in a row in the club in Tokyo, came back, literally slept for a day and a half. Tried to force myself to be productive during the week, but was kind of hitting a bunch of mental blocks because I'd scheduled to film and to record over the last 2 weeks before going to Tokyo and then after, and I just wasn't really making the progress that I wanted to. And then I think kind of embracing that frustration, and rather than pushing back at it, just being okay, cool, I'm not feeling this, let me just take a step back, like energetically at least, and reflect, and then, ask questions, ask the audience what they think, ask people that I know that listen to the podcast what they think, and then just sort through my thoughts. And now I feel like a lot more settled in how I want to approach it. I feel like before I was like, okay, I just need to make as much content as I can, but I hadn't really figured out the approach yet. And now I feel not as like anxious or like, I don't know, like the pressure is released a little bit, and then I can sit in comfortably creating content. And I think, if you're like struggling with any decision-making process at the moment, there's a time to sort of be proactive and like really engage with an issue and a problem. And then when you feel this sense of frustration building up, allowing that to indicate to you to just take a step back, like energetically at least, and then see if you can kind of zoom out a bit and get like a clearer perspective. And the same thing, like I was talking to a friend who's also working on creating content for her business, and she was like trying to explain to me this concept that she had in mind. And I was kind of like, well, I feel like, for what you're trying to do, maybe creating this kind of content would make more sense. It'd be a lot more straightforward. You'll be able to create like a portfolio of like what it is that you do, and then you can add more layers to what you're trying to make, because I feel like for you specifically and your business, the content idea that you're giving me is like a more advanced one and not something that's necessarily going to help you like broaden your follower base or your customer base. And just like through this conversation, we were both able to work through so many of the like pain points that we had in our individual spirals. So yeah, I think, it's not as simple as you just need to figure it out on your own, or you have to ask an expert to help you figure it out. Just finding like a balance. If you're heading in one direction and you're feeling like you're not making progress, take a step back, consider a different approach, and just sort of let things unfold and settle. So yeah, I'm glad I like trusted the process, and hopefully it pays off. This is, I guess, officially day one of me working on like new content stuff. So hopefully all the episodes that come after this are helpful too. Anyway, that's just an update. Yeah, today's episode is about emotional accountability and just accountability in general in relationships, and the real reason why you can't get back together with someone, whether it's in a platonic situation, or after a friend breakup, or in a romantic situation after a breakup. I feel like this is the thing that I haven't been able to like put words to, but has been the thing that's been actually stopping me from being friends with someone after I feel like really let down or disappointed or hurt, or, wanting to let an ex have access to me, or like be quote unquote friends with them, or, just, they slide back in the DMs and they stay in requested. The reason I think a lot of the times for me, and maybe for you too, is the lack of emotional accountability. Okay, so we're going to refer to Psychology Today and this article, which I will link in the show notes. So emotional accountability is basically someone who is able to consider an alternative perspective in the context of an interpersonal relationship. So an emotionally irresponsible person is an individual who lacks empathy for a loved one, is unable to consider an alternative perspective in the context of an interpersonal relationship, and is frequently insensitive to those whom he or she is closest. This person feels entitled to do what he or she wants without concern for how these actions and words impact the people who ought to be the most important. These tendencies are glaringly apparent in an interpersonal relationship, but frequently camouflaged in public life. An intelligent person realizes having manners and appearing to care about others generates a favorable reputation. Yet, behind closed doors, where there are no quote-unquote real consequences, this person often exhibits a lack of empathy for others and an avoidance of uncomfortable emotions. Yet, it is the unpleasant emotions that allow a person to self-reflect, admit fault, feel remorse, and operate with a conscience. The discrepancy between the person's public persona and the quality of his or her interpersonal relationships may be very vast. This disparity frequently causes loved ones to question their sanity. And then in italics, we have examples. Everyone thinks he's such a great guy. Nobody knows how he really is. I'll be the bad guy if I leave. Everyone loves my mum. Maybe it's me. Am I the only one that she treats like this? It's probably my fault. My entire school loves Lisa. Nobody sees how she treats others when no one is looking. Nobody will believe me if I talk about the bullying. T. Unfortunately, emotionally irresponsibility is easy to disguise in an interpersonal relationship because it is one person's word against another's. Utilizing deflection, minimizing, and justifications, an emotionally irresponsible person quickly dismisses a loved one's feelings and exonerates himself or herself. He or she easily evades the discomfort of emotional responsibility. The signs of an emotionally responsible person include an ability to see a loved one's perspective, even if it differs from his or her own, the capacity to self-reflect and own his or her part in a conflict, experiencing sincere remorse after making a mistake, being emotionally attuned and conscientious of others, an ability to be vulnerable and identify and discuss difficult feelings, sincerely apologizing for a mistake. Emotionally sophisticated people can resolve conflict because they can entertain a different perspective, self-reflect, and own their part in a conflict. In addition, because they have empathy, they are usually conscientious of others. Following a selfish act or a mistake, they usually feel remorse, apologize, and attempt to repair the rupture in the relationship. For example, Liz says that she is frustrated with a friend, Beth, who is having difficulties with her romantic partner. Liz tells Beth her partner is a liar and she needs to stop listening to him. Beth starts to cry and defend her partner. Liz pauses because she experiences empathy for Beth, who is hurting. She self-reflects and realizes she may have been too strong. She softens her tone and apologizes, saying, "I'm sorry, Beth. I know you are hurting. I do not think what I said helped. I respect your process and I'm here for you." Alternatively, an emotionally irresponsible party only contemplates how he or she feels and is incapable of entertaining a differing viewpoint. Resolving conflict becomes almost impossible because of the person's belief that he or she is always right. For example, after Liz tells Beth her partner is a liar and she needs to stop listening to him, Beth breaks down. Liz, only able to consider her feelings and viewpoint, continues to reprimand Beth. "Why can't you see this? Are you blind? He does not care about you. What is wrong with you? You are one of those codependent types. I cannot listen to you anymore. Good luck." Obviously, Beth is doubly hurt and upset, and Liz lacks empathy and walks away without any remorse for the way she spoke to Beth. Beth refrains from talking to Liz anymore. A second example includes a mum and a son. The son tells his mum he wants to use his money at a garage sale. The mum dislikes garage sales and says, "No, you cannot buy someone else's junk." The son is upset and says, "You promised me you'd hold my money for me until I found something I really want, and I found something I really want." The mother denies his request again. The son is angry because he believes she is breaking her promise. He yells at her and runs to his room. The mum is furious, but she pauses and self-reflects. She also attempts to see things from her son's perspective and realizes he is right. She promised him he could have his money when he found something he really liked. She treks up to his room, admits she is wrong, and gives her son his money. He hugs her and runs off. When he returns, he hands her the item he bought at the garage sale. It is a record album of her favorite band. She hugs him and tells him he is generous, thoughtful, and kind. Oh my God. On the other hand, say the mum fails to try and see the situation from her son's point of view and lacks empathy for him. She digs in her heels and yells at her son for liking junk. She reprimands him for being upset and tells him to stay in his room until he can be pleasant. The rift in the relationship grows because the son does not trust the mum to keep her word and is often punished for saying how he feels. The two grow apart. An emotionally responsible human being is a person who can maintain healthy and close relationships with others who share the same emotional abilities. Resolving conflict, conscientiousness for others, and admitting fault in a relationship are essential capabilities that allow a person to care for and understand those around him or her. This is not to say that an emotionally intelligent person won't have a selfish moment or make a mistake, but it does mean he or she is capable of owning a selfish act while attempting to repair the hurt it inflicted. Remedying relational missteps maintains closeness, joy, and trust. And this is by Erin Leonard, PhD, practicing psychotherapist, and the author of 3 books about relationships and parenting. Okay, so slay, because I think that this is like speaks to so much on a micro level on our interpersonal relationships, and also like on a societal level, because I feel like even when we're talking about, you know, social injustice and inequality and, you know, people being able to understand different sides of one complex social or political issue, a lot of the times we are not approaching these conversations with a sense of emotional responsibility, or we are not being met with emotional responsibility, because when you have this like ideological division, whether in a relationship or between like groups of people, you're never able to meet a middle ground. You're not able to extend a sense of empathy for each other, and you're operating from a binary right versus wrong point of view, good versus bad. And it's more like rooted in ego and pride, and like how can someone out moralize the other, who is more right, who is more correct, who is more good. And when you're able to sort of like diffuse your ego for a minute and say, okay, how can I better understand the point of view of the person who maybe is triggering me or who I don't agree with, and how can I hold space for these two truths, like my truth and this other person's truth, rather than like thinking it's one or the other. You know, you can hold space for something that you fundamentally don't really agree with, and look to the things that you have in common that might not be so obvious on the surface. You know, like if you think about the divide between men and women, when women speak about their experiences with men that have been unpleasant and might trigger men into being like, oh, you hate men, blah, blah, blah. Okay, men are not approaching women in that situation with emotional responsibility, because they are just assuming that like how they feel about their own behavior and men's behavior and their experience with men in general can speak for women. And, you know, they're not able to connect or support with women in that moment. And then of course women can also be emotionally irresponsible in their response to that, or their reaction to that, because they're like, well, you don't even, like, why should I even bother to care about what men think or your point of view if you've already decided that you're not going to care about mine, and you're not taking any steps to like improve your ability to do so. So, you know, maybe I have a bias towards who is and isn't justified. Both sides are justified, but I feel like, you know, the problem is when you are trying to hold someone to a standard of emotional responsibility, in spite of the fact that they're not capable or not willing to do that. And that's when you just kind of have to pull away. And it can get like messy in your interpersonal relationships. Like I think about a lot of my friend breakups in the past have been because of this like conditional or one-sided emotional responsibility and accountability. Like I think there's also a balance to be struck, especially for someone like me who is like very opinionated, and my opinion or my point of view is usually a little bit left of what is considered conventional or acceptable, or just like a little bit not what you've heard before or what people usually think. And I don't feel that I'm like right or better than anyone in my point of view. I just think it's a different point of view, and I express it in attempts to, you know, better understand and vet it so that I can develop it further. You know, I don't need to cater to every single person on the planet. I know that there are people that relate to how I feel or my experiences or my perspective, and, you know, we can talk through this together and work towards like whatever our next thing is. But of course, there are people that are going to be triggered by that. And it's like a double standard, because I understand where like the majority of you is coming from, because we're being brought up in that society. We are taught that that is like the way to think. So I get it, but like I don't want to have to think like that if I don't want to, or if it doesn't resonate with me. And my alternative point of view is just as valid as like the mainstream one, because I can hold space for both. Okay, so I already understand, like, you know, on enough of a level, like the way that men, for example, are marginalized or oppressed under the patriarchy first. There are a number of struggles that they go through that I may not be put under the same pressure as, but like the oppression that women face as a result of the oppression that men face also comes with its own barriers and challenges, which I have been face to face with, which I have attempted to overcome or continuously attempt to overcome. And I recognize that that is a process and it takes effort. So if I'm met with someone who invalidates my point of view, while my point of view builds on top of, you know, where I understand that they're coming from, like, that to me is a lack of emotional responsibility on their part, because but then it's also like not my responsibility to make them emotionally responsible, because how could they understand anything outside of what they already believe? Like, you already believe the default. You haven't spent any time to seek an alternative perspective. So of course you don't understand it, especially if you're not open to it. And I think that's another thing that, you know, we can all work on to a degree, like our openness to alternative perspectives. I would be lying if I didn't say that I don't get caught up in my own point of view and being able to assert that when someone is like coming for me and I'm like, well, you're not even considering what I'm saying. And I'm assuming that I've already considered where they're coming from, but, you know, there might be things that are relevant to them that I haven't considered before. But if we were both emotionally responsible, that would just be like a conversation. It wouldn't really be a conflict. It would be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's really interesting. And what do you think? Oh, yeah, well, I feel like this. Oh, really? That's like similar or different to how I feel. Like, that's how like a healthy, mutually emotionally responsible conversation goes down. But one that is like one-sided or lacking emotional responsibility on one or both parties, it's like, okay, well, I feel that it's like this, they're not open to your point of view. And you're like, okay, but I see that point, but I don't really feel like that because blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, you don't understand that because of me, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, it's like just it skews too far. A healthy, open, emotionally responsible, accountable conversation, friendship, you're open to the full spectrum of perspective. You slide across the spectrum, up and down it, and if at any point you don't relate, you can take a minute and recognize any emotional triggers that you have and take responsibility for it. Recognize, you know, it's not their fault that you feel a certain way, and it is your responsibility to manage that, communicate that, process it. But if it's lacking emotional accountability, it's more like a battle, okay? You're not looking in the same direction anymore. You're not on the same page. You're not on the same team. You're not extending empathy to each other. You're just trying to win, okay? And think about what it is you really want long term. Do you want peace? Do you want to be happy, or do you want to be right? And this is a thing that I think a lot of people who are operating too much from their ego get caught up in. You think that being right, or they think that being right is going to bring them joy, but all it really gives them is pride. And pride is a much lower vibration. You know, it doesn't exist. It doesn't feed you and empower you the same way that just being happy does, you know. And people that have never been happy before, or have confused pride with happiness and haven't bothered to like look outside their own ego or pride, you can't argue with them. You can't get them to see or understand what you see or understand, because they've never seen it and they're not open to it. They think that that's it. The top of the hill is the pride. The top of the hill is being right. But what will you lose in service of the illusion of being right? You know what I mean? Like, even for me, someone who is often correct, just because I overthink everything and I do look at multiple perspectives. So, you know, that I'm like closer to a universal truth than I am to just like asserting my dominance over others. Like, I don't really care about being right. It's just like certain patterns and dynamics exist and they unfold the same way regardless of how you want to spin it. Like, I try my best now to not be so assertive in my interpersonal relationships with my point of view or how I feel or needing to be right or needing to defend a position, because it doesn't make your relationship better if you're correct. You know, for me, making content and sharing my point of view, that's its own thing. I'm not like having a conversation with someone unless it's a guest, who I will always like, you know, try to leave space for. Like, I do have to assert my point of view in a certain way if I'm making content to make it clear, but I'm not going to do that in my interpersonal relationships. Like, recently there's been times where like I've really disagreed with what my friend is saying, but I recognize that what they're saying is kind of like important to them, or it's just them venting, you know, so I don't have to like counter their venting with like, this is my opinion. It's like, just let them vent, you know. I don't need to constantly be on the defense for things that are important to me if it's not relevant to the context. And I feel like sometimes, like when I feel like I'm not being met with emotional responsibility, it's the other person feeling like they need to assert their rightness over my like trauma or my experience. You know, it's like, okay, I'm coming from a place that's personal to me. Okay, you don't need to have experienced what I've experienced to at least hold space for it. And also, like, you're not a better you're not like a better person because you have an alternative perspective that is not rooted in anything personal and just your opinion, by trying to assert that over me or trying to get me to come from your point of view, which is a different experience to mine. You know, I can accept that like you have a point of view that's different to mine, but you're invalidating something that is personal to me in that process about something that's not even relevant to our friendship, right? But then there's also been times where people have felt like my point of view is like a personal attack on them because it triggers things that they haven't resolved within themselves that are like not relevant to the current situation. And it's like a conditional, like, okay, well, you can't feel the way that you feel coming from your point of view because of how I feel about my point of view and my experience, which means like all of these things that basically invalidate you and we should still be friends. That's a bit wacko to me because it's like, okay, well, I'm doing my best to hold space for you and recognize that, okay, some of the things that I say may be not relevant, maybe not comfortable for you, that's fine. But you can't just then decide that you can go off however you want and then I'm just going to be okay with it. Like, you're not okay with it and that's okay. For me, like, I have to be okay with it, but I'm not okay with that and you're not okay with it. So this is just one way. You know what I mean? And I feel like in a romantic relationship, it's like similar struggle that people have regardless of the gender dynamic, whether it's like male to female, female to male, 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 female, female. Like, you're trying to get your partner to understand where you're coming from in order for you to feel safe in the relationship, feel heard and move forward. But their refusal to do so because of something that's uncomfortable within them stops them from being able to do that. And then you kind of reach this impasse when they want the relationship to continue in spite of that. it doesn't feel comfortable because you're like, well, you haven't taken accountability, or you haven't been able to be empathetic for this thing that's like actually important for me, for us to move forward. So if we do move forward, this issue is like always going to come up because I don't feel like accepted in this part that's important to me. You don't even feel it's important. You can't even hold space for it. So how do we move forward from here, you know? Anyway, all of this to say that life's tough. Unfortunately, we will come across these sorts of dynamics in our relationships, and I think being aware of it and having the language to identify it and like try and process it is important. I think that it's also about finding a balance. No one is perfectly emotionally responsible, and not every circumstance facilitates both parties being able to be emotionally responsible if like one of them is just refusing to be able to do that. And I think that if being emotionally responsible and accountable is important to you, then you have to move away from people that aren't able to do that. You know, like it just depends how important it is to you. For me, it's very important. I have very, very low bullshit tolerance. Every day, the bullshit tolerance gets lower and lower. Like, and thank God, because my life has improved so much as a result of being able to curate the vibes to my liking. You know, like I don't want to hang out with people who I feel like won't give me the space to just be as unhinged as I want to be, like in the way that I'm willing to do for other people. Because it's like Russian roulette, dude. Like when will it be? When will you blow up and kind of like hold all this resentment towards me that you're not willing to express because you can't process your own feelings? And now that's my fault, you know? Or if something is really important to me, I'm not willing to just let it slide in service of like a superficial relationship with someone who wants a deep relationship with me. You know what I mean? Like there are plenty of things I'll let slide on a superficial level if it's like not that deep for me, not that deep for them, you know. Yeah, haha, true, lol, lol, lol. Okay, whatever, like smile and nod. Sometimes the easiest thing to do to get out of a situation or to manage a situation is just to like gray rock, which is where you just like passively like hee hee ha ha, like you don't place too much weight on it, you just keep it moving, because to argue and get into this is just not worth it, because ultimately you know you're on totally different pages and this is going to be meaningless in like 2 days anyway. But when you have like this dissonance between the depth or the investment that someone is expecting from you and the lack of empathy or emotional responsibility they're willing to extend to you in exchange for that, then that's when I think we have a problem, right? It's like if you want to be deeply connected with someone, or if you want to feel like emotionally invested into by someone, you need to reciprocate that with your own emotional responsibility and accountability. That is the exchange that we're kind of having when you are in a healthy relationship or dynamic of any kind. It's like, okay, I radically accept who I am and my position and how I feel and the triggers that I have that might come up in response to who you are, because I radically accept who you are and, you know, the parts of you that I may not know yet, but I'm open to that, and I'm willing to be emotionally responsible in the face of that in service of this relationship continuing, whether that's a friendship, whether that's a working relationship, whether that's a romance, and whether it's a relationship between you and a family member too. These dynamics are just human, okay? And the context is just slightly different, but I feel like the dynamic stays the same. The details don't matter that much. And then vice versa, you know? Like if I care about someone being in my life, the exchange is I'm going to hold space for you and who you are and let you be who you are. And then I'm going to also take responsibility for how I might feel if that triggers parts of me that I wasn't aware of, or parts of me that might be uncomfortable with that. And that doesn't mean that you just like enable people that you care about. You can give constructive feedback. You can give constructive criticism. You can express your discomfort and like your point of view, but it's just like being rooted in who you are, but still holding space for others. You know, some people are barely even rooted in who they are, clinging to a concept of who they might be or who they would like to be or how they would like to be seen, and then not open to anything that challenges that, you know? And I feel like if you want to have a healthy relationship of any kind, it's that openness that is what, like, you know, keeps the magic alive in your life and in your relationships. You never know how something is going to evolve. And you don't want to, at least for me personally, like I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm closing myself off to the magic, the sprinkle of life. You know what I mean? Like recently, I think in one of my voice memo episodes, I talk about being friends with men, being friends with boys. And also in like the episodes where I talk about, you know, making new friends and meeting new people, I think that it helps to just be like, have boundaries and standards, but also be open. Like 80-20 rule kind of applies to everything in life, you know? You want to be 80% on your boundaries, on your shit, and 20% you leave a little window for the unexpected, you know? If someone has been acting towards you egregiously, then okay, goodbye. You can close that door forever. But, you know, sometimes you meet someone on a bad day or you're in a bad mood and then it doesn't really go so smoothly. And you don't have to like write people off. You're 80% on your boundaries. Okay, let me just like stay away from this person for now. But that 20% could turn into a beautiful friendship, you know? You just never know. It's like kind of crazy. The people that I am close with now or that I consider friends now, I wouldn't have been able to predict 5 years ago that I would be friends with them, you know? Because some of them it's like, oh, we met a long time ago, but we never really spoke in depth and, you know, didn't really think that much of it. But through a series of unexpected events, we are like way closer than I could have ever predicted when I met them. Especially some of them I'm like, I really did not like this person before, but after like getting to know them and being open to them showing me parts of themselves that maybe I wasn't previously aware of, or parts of themselves that have developed since I first met them, it's like, oh, okay, like we actually get along and we have more in common than we thought, and we have a mutual respect that transcends like, you know, needing to be the same or needing to think the same. We have different opinions, and that's what makes the connection and the relationship interesting, because we learn from each other. We can hate on each other or each other's interests and it just not be that deep, you know, because it's still important to be around someone who might have similar values to you but has different opinions. I think that's like what's really interesting about being a person and experiencing life and having friends, and, you know, being able to just see life from different points of view. But not everybody thinks that way. Some people just want to hear themselves mirrored back to them 80% of the time, 100% of the time, you know? Like, yeah. Like, what is the point of being alive if not to have different experiences and experience life, experience things, you know? Otherwise, you're doing the same shit every day and then you die. Like, the hell? You're going to look back on your life and there's not much to look back on. I feel like that would be kind of boring. And yeah, it can be hard and uncomfortable to manage your emotions and be like, okay, fuck. I'm feeling like triggered by this. Is it because they said something to me, or because they said something about something that I'm sensitive to? That's also a huge difference, you know, because a lot of people, it's like nothing was said to you directly, just like a what's it called, reference to something that is a deep-seated subconscious trigger for you, and you fly off the handle, that's a you issue, and that requires your emotional responsibility more than the other person's. You know, like recently, Nicki Minaj, Megan Thee Stallion situation. It was like one line in Megan Thee Stallion's song, not even a direct reference to Nicki, but she went on like a 72-hour Twitter rant and released like the worst diss track of all time from a rap icon, which we hate to see. Because obviously Megan has referenced something that is a deep-seated subconscious trigger for Nicki that she hasn't acknowledged or refuses to acknowledge just yet, may never acknowledge. And that would be when Nicki's emotional responsibility would need to kick in order for her to manage the situation with grace and in a way that serves her best interest too. Like, okay, you can make the diss track, but at least give yourself some time to process emotionally so you can write a good one. But, you know, we don't live in a perfect world, and that's kind of the point. So the best that we can do is to learn how to navigate these situations. But yeah, I feel like, you know, if you're on the fence about letting someone who's disappointed you back into your life, maybe it's the lack of emotional accountability that you can't quite put your finger on, but you're like, oh yeah, that's the thing, because, you know, I said that this was important to me. They like refused to hold space for that, but then insisted on a level of closeness that I couldn't provide unless that was accepted, you know? Like when I was younger and I was talking about the racism that I was experiencing, literally had nothing to do with like my friends, people that I thought were friends, because I was experiencing it. Because when I would talk about it, it would always be from randoms. Not that people close to me weren't also racist, but, you know, I was talking about people at clubs that were like harassing me or like abusing me. And then people that were close to me, so triggered. Like, why are you saying this? It makes white people look bad. I'm like, well, stop doing bad shit. Like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. But then at the same time, they're like, you know, I care about you. I love you. I want to be your friend. And I'm like, well, you can't be my friend if you can't accept that this is something that I'm processing right now. It has nothing to do with you personally, but you're making it personal. And that's weird because it's not about you. It's about me. Okay, for once it's about me. And if you can't handle that, then how do I care about you? Because you have not provided a foundation for this to be a two-way street, right? So, you know, everyone's standards are going to be different. Like other people maybe don't care that much about having an experience like what I had experienced acknowledged in their personal friendships, and they can just keep it moving. But I'm just like, I couldn't move past from that. That's what I was processing at the time. It was like highly traumatic for me. And I couldn't be around people that were invalidating it because it was already being invalidated everywhere. The least a friend could do would be like, that sucks and I feel bad for you, you know? But instead they're pushing back on it. And I think in like a romantic relationship too, it's like, hey, like I feel really uncomfortable with you talking to your ex. I just don't feel like I can move past it, or you need to give me some sort of explanation for or reassurance in how we can move forward or still be together, whether you're remaining in contact with them or you take steps to distance yourself, right? And if your partner is saying, well, you're being ridiculous, like I'm going to do it whether you like it or not, but also isn't willing to face the consequences of you breaking up with them or you not being together because you can't handle that or not being willing to accept it, then that's like an issue, right? How can they expect you to fully accept them and what they're going to do without any consideration for you? Like I think a healthy relationship or compromise would be like, okay, I see what you're saying. I care about my relationship with you more than my relationship with them. So I'm going to distance myself from that relationship in service of this relationship. And you can't ask people to do that, but you can flag how you feel and see how they respond. It's not your fault if they don't value your relationship more than that, but at least you know, You know what I mean? Because if you step away from it, then you can move towards someone who actually is going to care about things the way that you do. Or you'll realize like, oh, there are people in my life that do accept me as I am for all these things. And they would never ask me to compromise that in service of making them feel more comfortable. So why the fuck would I do that if it's important to me and it's not important to them, but they want access to me? You know what I mean? It's like, for me and the type of content that I create, you could assume that it would alienate me from a lot of people in my real life. Literally no one in my real life cares that I talk on the internet for free. They're just like, oh, that's just something that she does. Some people do or don't engage with the content, and we just keep it moving. You know, like I have so much more to me outside of that. And I'm very lucky that I have people who, you know, don't care, or at least support me in my endeavors, even if it is from a distance. And if I ever came across someone who was like, well, who I maybe cared about, and they're like, well, you can't do that if you're going to be in my life, I'd be like, well, why the fuck would I want to be? I can do what I want and have people who care about me without having to compromise myself. Why would I put myself in a situation where I don't get to do what I want and I don't think you actually care about me? You know what I mean? Something to think about if you ever come across this situation, which I'm sure you will. It's part of the human experience. I have no doubt. Everyone can relate to this on some level, right? And it's just unfortunate when that happens, but also more and more I appreciate how rejection really is protection. And seeing a relationship and someone for who they really are, even if it's against what you expected, even if it's painful to see it, the sooner the better. You know, you suffered for a year. The only thing worse than suffering for a year is suffering for a year and one day. The only thing worse than being friends with someone who you thought actually cared about you but doesn't, for however long you have been friends with them or however long you've been in a relationship with them, the only thing worse is that and a day. You know, and it can take you time to separate from people that aren't willing to be emotionally responsible, because your mind or your ego has created an identity that includes them, or a future that includes them, and now you have to let go of it. Now you have to reconcile with the fact that it won't be realized, and you have to draw a new picture, one that maybe isn't so easy to draw, because when you were drawing the one with this person, it was just like fun and heady and whatever, it was automatic. That's tough, but you know, it'd be like that sometimes. And then also, like, if you have people that are trying to hold you to a level of emotional responsibility that you're not comfortable with, ask yourself why that is. What is it that you identify with so strongly that you're not willing to let go of in service of people that you might actually care about? You know, that's kind of the sad thing too. It's like, you might actually care about someone and you might actually want to be in a relationship with them, but you don't yet know how to take responsibility for your emotions. It's important that you take steps to do that yourself. Those other people can't do that for you, because that's like an internal process that only you have access to. Other people can trigger an awareness of it. Other people can encourage you to try and do it, but they can't do it for you. You just have to sit in the discomfort. You're not going to die from feeling uncomfortable emotions. It's not going to be nice. Maybe you're going to cry a little bit or a lot. Maybe you need to scream into a pillow. Maybe you need to take a boxing class. Maybe you need to see a therapist. Maybe you need to do meditation. Maybe you need to do thought dumping. Maybe you need to do some positive scripting. Maybe you need to print out the emotion wheel and start identifying things. But if your higher purpose or goal is to have healthy relationships and to genuinely connect with people, then I think it's worth it. You know, like painful pain, like physical pain as a result of like physical harm is one thing. It is there to protect you and your skin suit that carries your soul and your spirit through this life. And then emotional pain, it triggers an awareness of your boundaries, of your insecurities, of things that you either could work on or things that you are trying to protect. And on a case-by-case basis, I feel like you need to assess. It's not as easy as like every time you feel discomfort, it means that you're under attack, or every time you experience discomfort, it means you have to lean into it and you want to move into your, like, you want to move out of your comfort zone. Because sometimes it's like somebody says something really rude and disrespectful to you, you feel uncomfortable and you need to stand up for yourself. Or someone says something that's not rude, not about you, but triggers you. You don't have to stand up for yourself. Maybe you can self-reflect. You know, it's different things require different responses. And I think it's being aware of the fact that you will need to put in a little bit more effort, and you can't necessarily just have a one and done answer for everything. But at least having like, you know, knowledge of the dynamic at play, or like the skill that needs to be sharpened a little bit in each situation, that helps, I think. Like, I feel like becoming aware of the term emotional accountability, recognizing where it exists and where it doesn't in different relationships, whether they're present, past, or future, gives me a lot to think about, you know. Everybody's standard for emotional accountability is different, you know, because I have, for example, like distanced myself from someone who wasn't able to hold themselves emotionally accountable in our friendship, and then other people I know stay friends with them. And whether it's because they didn't have the same level or type of conflict as me, or because to them, like, it's not as important, which is okay, you know. I'm not going to fight people on that. And I'm grateful for the people who don't feel like they have to pick sides, or are flexible in an ability to, you know, be friends with me and someone else that I don't like. So yeah, and also like with the Liz Beth example, yeah, like your friend's dating a loser, you don't like it, but they come to you for advice and then they keep going back to them. Their standard is different to yours. Maybe they would like it to be better, but they're not yet willing to do anything about it. You just have to accept them as they are, and distance yourself accordingly if it's like, you don't really like being around someone like that. Everyone's standard is different, you know, because there are some people who, okay, yeah, I know that regardless of who they're going to date, it's not going to be something that I would necessarily support. I don't support that person entering my friend's life, but I support my friend being able to make her own decisions and learn her lessons the way that she's going to learn them. So like if her standard for emotional responsibility is lower than mine in her relationship with somebody else, then fine, you know. But if at any point she or he or they lack the level of emotional responsibility in our relationship that I need to give the way that I am capable of giving or want to give in a friendship, or that they would like for me to give to them in our friendship, then that's a different story, right? Does that make sense? Comprende? Let me know what you thought. Let me know if there's anything I missed out or any topics that you want me to explore. Welcome to season 6 of Friend Crush with Amber Killer. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, SoundCloud. You subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow the meme page on Instagram at friend.crush. I do more like questions and like topic shout outs on that Instagram page, because I feel like that's where like the real dedicated followers are. I get like very nuanced feedback on that Instagram page, so I'm very grateful, because I think like a lot of people follow me on TikTok but have no idea that I have a podcast or an Instagram or a Spotify, or that there's more to my life than talking to myself in my room about random ass topics that come into my unhinged brain. So thank you for tuning in. Love you so much. Stay hot and having fun. Duh. Drink lots of water. Tell your friends and family you love them. Go be a better person, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.